Welcome to the Invested Dads Podcast, simplifying financial topics so that you can take action and make your financial situation better. Helping you to understand the current world of financial planning and investments, here are your hosts, Josh Robb and Austin Wilson.
All right. Hey. Welcome back to the Invested Dads Podcast, a podcast where we take you on a journey to better your financial future. Josh, it's been a weird lead up, but I think it's time to actually talk about something that everyone's going to want to talk about, Christmas.
Yes, that's right. The next best holiday. Oh, wait, Thanksgiving's coming up.
Oh, shoot.
Everybody always forgets about that. My wife gets so mad. It's her favorite holiday, and everybody skips over it. No, we're actually going to talk about something that already happened, and that's the election.
The election. It did happen.
And that, we were planning on doing it the next, the Monday after the, Tuesday was election. The Wednesday we were going to have it, and then Thursday we're going to publish it. And
too many balls in the air.
Yes,
I think. And a couple of those have settled since then. Not everything, but we'll get there. So I guess, yeah. So on the 3rd of November was, election day, and everyone went out and voted, and a lot of people voted beforehand, and a lot of people voted by mail or absentee or whatever they did. A lot of people voted. Record turnouts pretty much on every front, right?
Yes. Yeah, and that's, honestly, that's what you want to see is you want more people to vote because historically speaking, you do not see a large turnout for elections compared to the number of potential voters that are out there in the U.S. So, it was good to see there was more opportunity for people to vote through the expansion of, there was mail-in ballots, there was the absentee, the option to drop off ballots, all those different things to make it more accessible, which is a good thing, I think, long term.
Yeah, interesting that all of the, this happened in the midst of an ongoing health pandemic that we're all kind of working our way through right now. So that changed some of the means and the ways that people could or should, or felt like they should vote anyway. So, 2020 has been interesting. So that was the election. That was on the 3rd. So Tuesday evening, we all, sat down after dinner and turned on the TV, and we're kind of watching states and counts start coming in. And pretty much you start seeing the numbers come in, and you just know at that point that you're probably not going to know a lot.
Yeah. And they were, I think, pretty clear ahead of time. Like, there's just so much unknown.
Right.
There's enough absentee and online mail voting, anything outside of the actual physical voting to not be able to call too much or the results.
Yeah, I think that, late into the evening on Tuesday night, it was kind of, by election betting consensus looking like Trump had a really, really, really good shot and even had a decent shot on Wednesday morning. But the more of those later votes got counted in some of the key states, the more it started looking like Vice President Biden would then take the nod there. So some of the key states that were definitely close were Pennsylvania. Trump had a big lead for a while, but then a lot of those later votes got counted for absentee or whatnot, and those were generally speaking for Biden. So that pushed that state blue. Georgia was close. North Carolina became really close. Michigan, Trump had a good lead in, and then that became really close, and Biden ended up winning that one as well as Arizona and Wisconsin are another couple. North Carolina. So, those are some key states that everyone was watching. A lot of the other states kind of went as anticipated.
The one that shocked me was Alaska. They took forever to call that state.
Right, and Trump had a very large lead.
Yeah, and I just thought, what are they doing over there? Waiting for the
polar bears to get their votes in?
The dog sled bringing the mail votes coming in? I don't know what's going on.
What's that? The Iditarod.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to watch a movie about that. I don't want to go do it.
It seems cold.
Yeah. So Josh, kind of break down where it looks like. So we're recording this on the 10th. So we've waited a little while to kind of let things flesh themselves out and see where we're at. Where do things look right now?
Yes. So as of right now, over the weekend, this last weekend, Vice President Biden officially announced he had won and accepted the win. And so him and Kamala Harris had their victory speeches over the weekend. And so for our presidency, they've announced they've won based on the count. Now there are some outstanding lawsuits and some recounting of votes going on right now, but it appears to be, even with that, they're the high probability of going to be the next president and vice president.
Yes.
And then from a House standpoint, so the House really from the number of seats that were out there between the Democrats and Republicans, there was really a high probability that the Democrats were going to keep the House. And they ended up doing that.
They did.
The Democrats kept control of the House, but
they did lose a couple
some seats. Yeah. And so there was a little bit of switch there where the Republicans picked up some seats, but not enough to change the majority.
Yeah. And in the Senate.
Yep. And then in the Senate, again, based on the number of seats available, it was projected that the Democrats were going to sweep that. There was kind of what they called the blue wave, where they would take control of all three, the president, the Senate, and the House. While the Senate, as of right now, is still in Republican control. Now there are 2 outstanding Senate seats, which is both Georgia.
Correct.
Every state gets 2 senators, and both of the senators in Georgia are in a runoff.
Yep.
And so the election results, as of we speak, are 48 to 52. And so if you count the 2 Republican seats where they were before.
Right.
So if they lose to Democrats, it'd be 50-50 with a tie break going to the vice president.
Exactly. So yes, so if the Democrats are able to reclaim both of those 2, not reclaim, if they are able to claim both of those seats in the runoff in January, then they will have a 50-50 tie, but Vice President Kamala Harris would then be the tiebreaker. Yeah. It seems unlikely, based on what we're seeing numbers-wise, that Democrats are going to win both. They may win one, but if Republicans only win one, then they get 51, and they're in the clear and continue to keep that majority. And what does that create?
So the big deal now, and we'll get to this in a minute, is kind of what the reaction was, is because there was not a blue sweep, the Republicans, as of right now, control the Senate, as they did prior. That means there will be gridlock. That's the big word, gridlock, meaning that not one party has full control to push through an agenda without any opposition. From a market standpoint, that's big news.
It is big news.
Gridlock is the market's opinion. Gridlock is the best way to govern because it slows things down, it causes compromise, and it allows the market really to have less uncertainty of large changes, sweeping changes in certain healthcare or tax reform, those type of things from one party, either party.
Correct. Yeah, those are the specific 2 reasons that the market, following the election, it became pretty evident about later in Wednesday, not clear, but pretty evident later in Wednesday that we were going to have a Biden White House with a Republican Senate and a Democratic House. That was pretty evident late Wednesday, and it's only gotten more evident since then. And the market after the election was on fire. Yes. They liked the fact that you pretty much are going to keep status quo in terms of tax reform and healthcare regulation are the 2 things that the market was watching. So specifically speaking, the former vice president and president-elect Biden and Kamala Harris could not, work with, they didn't have enough Congress on their side to push through the tax reform that Biden had proposed, some of the healthcare things that Biden had proposed. And those are things that were risks for Wall Street, and those risks are a little bit less now. Yep. So I think that the week of the election was one of the strongest election weeks ever. Yes. And, the general market was up 6, 7, 8, 9%, depending on what area of that market you're looking at. So good news there. Definitely, gridlock can be thought of as not really anything can happen, and some people may think that that's bad, but Wall Street thinks that's pretty good.
Yep. And speaking of market reaction, we might as well mention Monday, the 9th, there was a big pop in the market, especially early on, because there was a drug company, Pfizer, who announced some COVID news in that their vaccine had a high rate of, what's the word?
The effective rate of the effectiveness of their
vaccine. The effective rate is over 90%.
Correct.
And also there was very little to no adverse side effects.
Yep.
And so that news really moved the market, especially a lot of the more value-oriented stocks, energies, airline, those type of things that have been beat down pretty hard because of COVID. Now, we bring that up to talking about elections because that had a bigger reaction than anything that happened the prior week with the election.
On a one-day basis.
On a one-day basis.
Correct.
And the reason for that is the market is more concerned about COVID than it is election results.
Especially now that they kind of understand that it's just going to be kind of as is. Yeah. They were waiting on vaccine news.
Yes. And it comes back to what we've always said is politics and investing really don't mix. I mean, there's a lot of news and headlines about proposals and things like that. But in general, the stock market doesn't care who's in office, who controls what. They'll react and adjust to whatever policies come out.
Yeah.
And so this news on something they do care about, which is COVID, which is impacting the economy and has caused a lot of issues, a positive news on that, you see the market react more to that than you do anything else. And so, again, coming back to what we've always said is you can have your opinions on politics and you can vote based on what your views and values and beliefs are, but you shouldn't adjust your holdings and your investment philosophy just based on an election result.
Correct. Yeah, especially, based on, regardless of what year you're looking at an election, there is potential for choppiness around there.
Yes.
Just because the market fears change, and there could always be change. But, yeah, looking out,
Yes.
generally speaking, things have been fine.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, as a long-term investor.
As a long-term investor, patience is key. So, Josh, I'm gonna give you dad joke of the week right now.
I'm ready.
I got a good one for you. So, why did Dad get rid of all the round plates?
I have a guess. And I'm going to guess because he wanted to eat 4 square meals a day.
It's because no one was eating a square meal.
Oh, man.
So, square meals are very important.
Meals, they're
Eat
good.
your vegetables,
And
eat your fruits,
grains,
eat your French fries,
protein,
hot dogs, pizza. Eat them all.
iced tea.
So, okay, what does this mean, Josh?
Yeah.
So, suppose I'm investor John Doe, the most generic name they use for
That's
all
right.
the corpses they don't know who that is in
Yes.
the crime shows. Investor John Doe says, oh my goodness, this is the outcome we're looking like right now. Should I sell my stocks?
Well, yes and no. Depends on what you're selling for. Do I need some money? Let's say I'm John Doe in retirement and I need a monthly withdrawal. Then maybe you need to sell a
Same
little bit.
thing as normal.
Yes. But to answer your question is, that really depends on where you're at in your overall financial plan, what you need to have accomplished and what your goals are. But really, the answer is no.
Not out of
Just
fear.
because of an election, you
Right.
should not sell your stocks. Now let's flip it.
Flip it. John Doe over here says, Josh, should I buy some stocks?
Yeah, and again, it comes back to what are your long-term goals? Should you buy stocks just because of the election? No. Again, it's the election
changed?
shouldn't drive
Yeah.
it, right?
Right.
But is now a good time to buy stocks? If you're a long-term investor,
It's
now
always
is
time.
always a good time to buy stocks
Exactly.
because 30, 40 years from now, the timing of when you bought in is less important from how long you stayed in.
Yep.
Compounding does more than the timing of getting in. And
Exactly.
so, is now a good time to buy a stock? Yeah. But it's not as good as it was 10 years ago. So, so it's like they say planting a tree. The best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago.
Yep.
The second best time is now.
Right now.
And so that's what it comes to investing is timing does not matter. Selling or buying should be not based on emotion, but it should be based on the needs in your financial plan. And so really when, and you talk to clients and, if you're for or against whoever wins, you can have an emotional reaction. And again, based on your values and all that, that's fine from politics standpoint. But your politics and your investing, you need to keep 2 different hats on. You switch back and forth because they don't mix. They shouldn't mix. And that's what we're reminding our clients is, we're long-term investors. Whoever wins the election, they're there for 4 years. Then there's another election. Every 2 years, there's people moving in and out of the different branches.
Exactly.
So there's no permanent when it comes to the election process. It's investing in companies over the long run. Do you think this company will be here through all the different presidencies?
Yep.
And that's what we're investing for.
And it's key to remember that historically speaking, through Democrats in the White House, through Republicans in the White House, through Democrats or Republicans in both sides of Congress, the U.S. economy has thrived. It has grown. It's had tough times also. The stock market has done the same. But over time, the economy has grown, which meant corporate earnings have grown, which meant the stock market has done well over time. Time is the key, as you've mentioned multiple times. But it doesn't really matter historically who's been in the White House because both sides have had favorable long-term returns.
Yep. And one of the things we always have to be careful about is the old argument, well, this time is different.
Right.
Because you can say that
every time.
and it's true, every election is different and this time is different than all the last. But that doesn't mean that the long-term goals have changed. And that's
Exactly.
really what you're focusing in on.
Yeah.
And so, you're right. Should you buy or should you sell? That's a great question. And that's something you should talk to your financial advisor about based on your needs and your plan.
Yeah.
Not what happened on Tuesday.
Right. So kind of next steps, let's think that way now. So obviously you mentioned it earlier, but in January now, so really the votes are cast aside from the Senate runoff in Georgia where both senators, 2 up for re-election, and 2 current challengers are going to what's called a runoff because they were too close.
Yes.
Going into this.
So this has nothing to do with the results of the presidential election.
This is the Senate.
It's a state thing where in Georgia, the results were so close, it forces a runoff to try again to make sure they get the end results. So it's all a result of what was already in Georgia's election laws. It's saying, okay, if it's within a certain percent, we do a runoff. And the runoff happens in January. And so, in a sense, I don't want to call it a do-over, but that's what it is everybody knows now it's a pretty tight race. So the idea is if I like candidate A, I should make sure I tell everybody, hey, you should vote for, it's a chance for, again, both candidates to go back out and say,
re-campaign.
Re-campaign and say, okay, you saw how close it was. If you think I'm the right one, make sure that you're motivating and encouraging everybody. And that's what you're going to see a lot of. If you live down in Georgia, you'll probably see a lot of political ads.
I would assume that every dollar on both sides of the aisle that has not been spent already is going to be funneled towards Georgia between now and voting day in January.
Because like we said,
it's key.
It's not just, I want to win the Senate seat, which is part of it. But the thing is, if we win the Senate seat, either party, that determines the control.
Exactly.
And so that's really what it comes down to is, they'll probably say there's more at stake than just, winning the Senate seat. It's control of the Senate overall.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's number one thing we're watching. Number two, obviously it has probably been noticed that President Trump has not yet conceded to the election results that, a lot of outlets have said this is pretty much what's happening. There are a lot of lawsuits in some key states that were very, very close that I think is going on mostly to make sure that the ballots that were in question, that they're the legal ones, they're done correctly. Everything's kind of on top of the table. So I think that that's what's going on right now. It appears that, it's probably not going to change the outcome, but it's good. Everyone should want a legal and fair election.
And it's not unprecedented. There's been in the past challenges to the election process to make sure it was done correctly.
Yes.
2000 was a good example with, George W. Bush and Al Gore, where they, in Florida, were looking through and redoing that count in some of the key areas down there. And that carried through until the Supreme Court, made sure that process was completed.
Yep.
And there is a deadline. There is a time frame that it has to be done because, again, the votes go in, and all the votes determined are the Electoral College, the representation from each state. And so there's a deadline for that, for them to go and actually cast their votes for the president.
Yeah.
And so there will be an end in sight. It won't go on forever, but it will be a little unknown for a little while. Mm-hmm. But like you said, with everything going on, the key is, for the most part, this was a very orderly, with like you said, with COVID and everything going on, the election process ran relatively smoothly. And, with a record number of early voting and absentee and all that stuff, it shows the ability for our country to adapt to what's needed to make sure that everybody has the best opportunity to vote.
I think that, as Americans, we can say that with that high voter turnout that we all saw, people were very passionate. Yep. But I think that democracy took a big win in terms of voter participation. Yep. And no matter what side of the aisle you fall in, we can be proud of that. Yep. Because it's the American people who have a voice, and it's an amazing gift that we have. So compare with like you had mentioned earlier, sometimes our voter turnout's not that great, and it's kind of scary how low it is sometimes. Mm-hmm. If you compare that to sometimes they have less elections maybe in some other European countries, but when they do have elections,
it's a high turnout,
crazy high turnout, and we're getting like close to Europe numbers on some of these like turnout numbers. So I'm very proud of that, and it was not. No elections without its hiccups or uncertainties, but hey, you had an election in the middle of a pandemic, and I think we're going to be all right.
Yep. So I'm going to ask you, Austin, about your vote.
Okay.
Was it early? Was it the morning of? The day of? Did you mail in?
I voted
vote in person?
2 days early in person.
Okay. And what was your experience? Waiting line?
I waited in line. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was Sunday. Mm-hmm. I waited in line for 30 to 40 minutes in the snow.
Oh, that's right, because it had the weird snow.
We had a weird, snow it wasn't like blizzard. Snowing, but it was blowing and cold. And I waited 30 or 40 minutes outside of the Board of Elections, and it was great that there were that many people there voting early. Yeah. And it went really smoothly, and it was great. What about you?
I voted the day of, so the Tuesday, where I vote, there's quite a few machines and very little wait in the previous elections, and I thought, well, based on the number of people that seem to be voting early, which here in Ohio, they had a pretty good window. I mean, there was, 4 weeks?
Yeah, it was pretty long.
It was a decent amount of time that you could go in and vote early. So I thought there's probably not going to be a big line, and sure enough, I went before work. I was in and out in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It was, and I joked the longest it took me was I got stuck behind a bus picking kids up for school on my way to the voting location. That was what slowed me down more than anything.
Yeah.
So, it was a very easy process. But, it's like I said, my wife, she voted early, and it just schedule-wise worked out for her. And she waited for maybe 10 or 15 minutes before getting in. But in general, it was, nice to have those options. And for people to, in my opinion, it really eliminates any excuse of not voting, because there's not just that one day.
If you give people quite a few options, your turnout should be high.
Yeah,
it was, and it wasn't help. So, yeah, I think the other wild card that continues to be in play is COVID, and it's probably actually really good that the election was when it was and not a month or two later, because COVID cases are not going down.
Yes.
They're actually increasing at around 100,000 plus per day, which is crazy high. Here in the United States, I think we had just crossed over 10 million cases. That's a lot.
That's a lot of cases.
So, yeah, I'm glad that we got that behind us now, and there won't be any risk to the election not happening or whatever, or being postponed. So the elections, and it's done. We'll just have to be patient. But yeah, the uncertainty is lessened at this point.
Now, I do want to say one last side note on this whole thing. As we're watching the results and everything, and they were talking about, Joe Biden had the largest number of votes ever. And, I said, well, that's great. But it's like when we're watching the Dow or any, the larger the number gets,
I know.
As population grows, would think that's actually a good thing. It's like, we have 300 and some million people here in the U.S. So you would
every
hope
election
over time,
should be
you
bigger.
should set that record every 4 years. But to me, it was just always funny when you talk percentages or you talk total number. With a growing population, a total number, it's the same as I say, we had more people watch the Super Bowl than ever before. Well, it's because there's more TVs than ever before. It's just that number to me is irrelevant.
Yeah.
But it was awesome to see, in general, the percentage of voters was going up. But every time I saw those, I thought, yeah, it's great, but it's also kind of a weird thing to say as, okay, don't give me percentages. I'm a percentage guy because you can compare it.
That's just probably a good disclaimer for listeners, whether they're watching the news in terms of finance numbers, stock market numbers, or election things like that. Percentages are better.
Yes. So like we saw earlier this year, biggest Dow drop ever
earlier this year. Yeah,
but it's the
points versus
percent. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We've had worse percentage moves in the past, but from a dollar, it's irrelevant.
Percentage moves are the great equalizer.
Yes. Yeah.
So keep that in the back of your mind as a little nugget today. So, Josh, what can listeners do to continue to support and help us grow this podcast?
Yeah, like we always say, first and foremost, subscribe to our podcast. That gives you the alert when something new comes out. And then second, if you know somebody who's talking about the election and just want our short little recap of it, then make sure you share this episode with them. We would love for you to do that. And then also like and subscribe to wherever you listen to it. Leave a comment. Any kind of review are great for us. It helps us rank a little higher. So that's always important. And then finally, as we release these every Thursday, if you love a topic for us to talk about, send us an email.
We love emails.
Yeah, hello@theinvesteddads.com. We would love to talk about the topics that you'd love to hear about.
All right. Well, until next Thursday, have a great week.
Yeah, talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Invested Dads podcast. This episode has ended, but your journey towards a better financial future doesn't have to. Head over to theinvesteddads.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and we had a positive impact on your life, leave us a review, click subscribe, and don't miss the next episode. Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hicks and Zerker Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.